The Invictus Podcast is brought to you by Sapien Athletica. Sapien Athletica, we are all.
We've been wandering in the dark, a million miles apart, going nowhere.
We are the unconquerable, the ones who will not back down, the ones who believe that anything is possible. Invictus looks to explore the stories about the people that have overcome some of life's hardest and most difficult challenges and have come out on the other side with a smile on their face and a hope in their hearts. People that have overcome all of the odds. No matter what you're going through right now, it gets better. You can defeat your demons and you can change your stars. We believe that the impossible is nothing. Welcome to the show. This is the first episode of the Invictus Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Blais. This podcast is meant to inspire those that are going through tough times in their life. And even if you're not, this podcast brings all of us together in the human condition of overcoming what life has thrown at us. Invictus is a poem written by William Ernst Henley over 130 years ago, and is the namesake of this podcast for the very reason it had touched me in my moment of need almost 6 years ago. Perhaps it will touch you as well, and I'm going to begin the inaugural episode with the reading of the poem that started everything for me. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. This poem means many things to me, and we'll get into them a little bit later in this first episode. But just know that the perspective that this poem gave me in my time of need is that regardless of the challenges and obstacles that we face in life, because we all face challenges, you get to determine from the very second that that thing comes into your life if it's going to conquer you or if you are going to overcome it. And your mindset in all of these things is the most vital and determining factor for your successes and your failures. In my case, it was a traumatic injury, and I could decide in the very second that it happened if it was going to define me or if I was going to overcome it, and it would be just a little part of my life. And no matter how bleak your own situation, you get to determine this, no matter what it is. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be a traumatic injury like myself. It could be a car accident that you had no ability to control. 9 times out of 10, we don't get to decide these things for ourselves. But what we do get to decide is how we react to them and how we can positively look at these things and allow them to make us who we are. Many people have asked me about my own story, and I figured I would begin this podcast with telling you my story. Only really my closest friends know this about me, but 6 years ago, I broke my back and was deemed an incomplete paraplegic. That means I lost the functioning and feeling below my waist, and I had to relearn how to walk and relearn how to do a lot of things. I was 20 years old. I was snowboarding in the mountains in Alberta, opening weekend at one of the mountains, and I hit a lip, and on the other side, it was a bigger drop-off than I had expected, and I came down and landed directly on my ass, and essentially, at that very moment, I couldn't feel my legs anymore. And it's probably one of the most terrifying experiences of my entire life. You just don't know in that instant. I thank God for shock of the body, because you don't really feel anything for the first 5 to 10 minutes. You kind of just get to sit alone there with your thoughts, and there's no feeling whatsoever. And then the pain starts coming, and yeah. In all honesty, my friends thought I was completely joking about it because I was laughing. And then they knew that something was wrong and that I wasn't getting down the mountain by myself. So I was very lucky to be with two of my closest friends at the time, and one of them was able to ski out, and the other one stayed with me and kind of kept me calm and talked to me through the whole process. And then ski patrol had to come. I don't know how long it took, but it felt like forever, and strap me to the back of a sled and ski me down. Unfortunately, the mountain didn't actually have snow enough to get to the very base, so they put me in the back of a pickup truck and drove me down to base camp, where I got into the medical tent and, cut off my my snowboarding gear, my snow pants and my coat, and kept me warm. And we waited for the helicopter to get there. You obviously kind of think of what happened, and you go to like, well, did I break my pelvis, or what did I do? You don't ever like think that you had a spinal cord injury from that instant until, you kind of figure it out on your own. Can't feel my legs, can't move them. Okay, you put 2 and 2 together, and that's what that's when it hits you. If I can be proud of one thing throughout the experience, the people in the base camp said I was the most calm person they've ever seen in that sort of circumstance. They've seen people that have broken their finger that were hysterical, and I was kind of just lying there. I don't know how I did it. I'm sure I was probably just in shock, and but it was nice to hear at the time. They loaded me into the back of a STARS air ambulance helicopter, and I was airlifted out of the mountain to Calgary. For those of you that know Alberta, Calgary is generally the closest place for when you're in Banff or the Kananaskis area. They loaded me up with painkillers on that helicopter. I felt like my head was detached from my body, because they combined, I want to say it was ketamine and fentanyl, the stuff that you're hearing that people overdose on today. That was the cocktail of what they gave me on this helicopter, and it at least allows you to forget about the pain and forget about yourself and your being for the 30 minutes it took to get to the hospital. I have no idea how long it took. It could have been hours, but once we landed, you go to the emergency room. They put you in one of those beds and curtain you off, and you sit there for, I want to say it was the better part of 6 hours, going through all the processes and everything, and you get your prognosis of what happened. And it's a little bit difficult for me to recall all of this because of the amount of drugs that I was given in the hospital. So, but I do remember them trying to do a central line. This is one of the things that will stick in my mind forever. They tried to do a central line to, I guess, give me more painkillers or to distribute them through my body in a more effective way. And they hit a artery when they were trying to hit the vein in my neck. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know too much about this stuff, but I almost bled out. So my injury wouldn't have killed me, but that came very close to it. I was in and out of test the entire evening because they were trying to make sure that I wasn't internally bleeding. So I was in and out of the hospital bed onto a stretcher down to the MRI or the CT scan or whatever it was, and put through it. I think it was at least 6 or 7 times. And when you're in that much pain and you have 6 nurses lifting you from bed to stretcher and stretcher to bed, it's probably the least fun experience of my entire life. And I wasn't a little guy at the time either. I was significantly putting a lot of effort in the gym, and I think I was at my heaviest about 205 pounds. So I feel very bad for those nurses, but I also realize how much effort it took to get me between bed and stretcher, and how easy I made it for them. Man. My end prognosis was that I had broken the 2 vertebrae above my T12 vertebrae. I think that's the right plural and singular form. And then 2 below it. But at the T12 level, I compression fractured it and pinched my spinal cord. I also didn't have a tailbone anymore, but who really gives a fuck about that in that situation? It's not like you're going to be sitting up anytime soon anyway. So that's what I was dealing with. And the next morning I would go in for surgery so that they would insert 2 metal rods, the 5 vertebrae on each side to keep the break stable and to kind of uncompress the spinal cord in hopes that there would be some recovery of nerve translation between the area of injury and the rest of my body. The thing with spinal cord injuries is that every single injury is different. They don't know what your immediate or long-term outcome is going to be. They don't know if you're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. They don't know if you're going to be able to walk again. They don't know if you're going to be able to walk with assistance. They really don't know. So after that surgery, I think it was about 4 or 5 hours, with my new metal friends in me, they couldn't really tell me much. And that was kind of the worst part, is that you just don't know. However, in my mind, and you can ask any of my friends, you can ask any of my family members, I was going to walk again. And I would be better than I was going into the injury. That was my mentality the whole time. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything, but at the end of the day, my mentality was one of positivity. This is my situation, and I'm going to beat it. I don't care what it takes. I'll do whatever. You tell me to do 10 hours of rehab a day, and I'll do 12 hours. That was my mentality. And the thing you don't really realize in that situation is that you are the one that has to stay positive, because everybody else around you is kind of like breaking down and looking at you with pity or whatever it may be. But you're the one that has to remain in high spirits for them. You have to be strong for them. I'm not saying I was a stoic throughout the whole process. I was in tears a lot of the time. I was questioning, why did I deserve this? Why did this happen to me? But at the same time, I was not willing to give up. And the very first day that I was able to do some sort of rehab, and how they start you with this sort of rehab is they try to get you to sit up. And your body, from all of the painkillers and everything, is so weak that you can't even sit up. You can't even sit on the edge of your bed. They'll try to get you to pretty much, you know how hospital beds will angle you? They try to angle you more and more per day. And then eventually they try to get you to sit on the edge of your bed without, well, I mean, I've talked to some people that have gone through similar situations, and even just sitting up causes them to pass out. I was very lucky in that didn't happen to me. Then they'll try to get you to reach to each side and touch like a ball or something, or, and it's like very elementary. You're essentially a child again, learning how to sit properly and hopefully maybe get up to your feet one day. They tell you the odds because, well, they always do. And being myself, I put a lot of research into spinal cord injuries and people that have overcome it and blah, 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 blah. 9 in 10 people don't get back on their feet after a spinal cord injury. They're in a wheelchair for the rest of their lives. And the people that do get out of the wheelchair, most of them are going to be walking with some sort of assistance, some sort of crutch, some sort of cane, maybe with a walker, maybe with some sort of support for their ankles so that they don't buckle. And I just kept telling myself, I don't care what the odds are. I'm going to be that one in 1,000 or whatever. And for those of you that know me, there's no wheelchair today. There's no cane. There's no walker. I'm one of the lucky ones. It completely shifts your perspective, because in that situation, you're praying for pain. You're praying to feel something, where it's a 180 from what we do on a daily basis. We try to avoid pain points. We try to stay as comfortable as possible, but you're hoping and praying that you feel something, because that means that you are getting better. And pain becomes your closest friend. It becomes the thing that you seek out. For me, when I was one of the first or couple times I went into the shower in the hospital, and how they do this for somebody that can't walk or support themselves is they put you onto a bed, a shower bed, and there's nurse assistants that go into the shower with you and help you. Well, they essentially shower you. You're pretty much an infant. And I think it was the second time I went into the shower, I felt the water on my legs. It felt like a million daggers into my skin at every single point. And I lost it. I cried. I was sobbing, because that meant that there was hope. Even though I knew from day one, that was my confirmation. And that was essentially my rebirth. For people that I've told about this, it was like I was being born again. It was the most powerful moment of my entire life. Your nerves are trying to fire. They're trying to meet each other. They're trying to send signals from your brain to your feet and back again. And it's the worst pain of your entire life. Nerve pain, if you've ever talked to anybody that's had it, it's this uncontrollable pain. You can't do anything to stop it except take gabapentin or these blockers that stop the signals from kind of getting interlaced, but you can't do anything about it, and you just have to embrace it. And it's this crazy, crazy thing. And I hope nobody that ever is listening to this has to experience it, but it's just this incredibly painful yet transformative experience. Everybody touts the use of morphine as being like this amazing painkiller, but for me it did absolutely nothing. My friends would always joke about, because in the hospital they give you this button that you press every 15 minutes or whatever it is. It's on a timer so you don't kill yourself with morphine doses. But every single time that timer came up, I would press that button, and I would be knocked out again for the 15 minutes or whatever. It would feel like I was asleep for 10 hours, but I would just wake up in this like drenched sweat, and it would be 15 minutes later and be time for my next hit. It was the worst thing ever. So instead of morphine, they started putting me on other stuff. They put me on a cocktail of whatever I was on in the helicopter, because it was the only thing that really helped me. So they put me on ketamine and they put me on fentanyl, and they combined them into a cocktail. And then there was hydromorphine, and there was all this other stuff that you never hear about until like you're in that sort of situation. The amazing thing about painkillers is that if you really need them, you're not going to get addicted to them. If you don't need them, that's when the addiction comes in. And I have no desire to ever touch those things again. But they do throw you for a loop. When I was in the hospital, I was in a private room, and the nurses kept asking me if I wanted to move to like a shared room or whatever. And it wasn't like I had to do it, but my mind at the point was, yeah, I want a friend, like somebody else that's suffering as much as me or something. I don't know what the mentality was, but I was like, yeah, bring me to a shared room. And my roommate at the time was, I'm sure he's dead today, unfortunately. He was a 90-plus-year-old man who had had a stroke. I was on the neuro ward. And every single evening, every single night, there was no sleep for me, because they were in there pumping his lungs out of liquid and trying to essentially keep him alive. It was a fucked experience for sure. It didn't really help that the painkillers weren't doing anything. And I mean, they talked to my mom and they actually asked her, does he use drugs recreationally or something? Because these things are not working. But what they didn't realize is that at the time I was drinking so much water because I had thought that was the thing to do when you're working out and trying to build muscle and all that stuff. So in the hospital, I was drinking probably 6 liters of water a day. My cup was never empty. So the painkillers were just getting flushed out of my system. And they didn't realize that that's what was doing it. It wasn't because I had this high tolerance or something. It was because I was drinking so much water. I only really got to lay eyes on my roommate when they were wheeling me out of there to go back to Edmonton on a plane, because there really wasn't much for me in Calgary. I needed to get back home, and the rehabilitation hospital that I would eventually end up at, the Glenrose, it was in Edmonton. So that was the final goal. That's where I had to be. And during the winter there, it was probably one of the worst winters we've had in recent memory, because I remember being put into the back of the ambulance on the tarmac at the airport and driving probably 50 kilometers an hour back to the West End to go to the Misericordia Hospital, where I would wait until I could go to the rehab hospital. I got to see all of my friends again, the people that weren't in Calgary or that were unable to come out to Calgary. It was awesome and pretty special. And I'm sure that if you ask any of them, they would say that there was a smile on my face. And I don't think it was because of the painkillers, but I think it was because there was this mentality that I knew that I would get better. And the Miz was incredible. The physios at the Miz, they were pushing me to like get up from the wheelchair, to always be in the wheelchair and rolling around the hospital, going down to the main entrance, going outside, everything, trying to kind of like get me into like just to move and everything. And that was very incredible. They even got me into a harness and got me out of the wheelchair and between the parallel bars so I could take my first steps. And that was something else. What they don't really talk about with any real traumatic injury is that the mindset and everything. They come from the Glenrose to actually evaluate you, to make sure that you're in the right mindset to go to rehab and to try to get better. Because a lot of people in these situations, they give up. They stop believing. They stop thinking that they can get better. And the mind is so powerful that the mind will make that their reality. It'll confirm their negative thoughts. it'll shut off any connection possibility between their upper and lower body. And for me, when the guy came and evaluated me, I was in this just state of, no, I'm going to get better. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to be the best patient you've ever had. And it really helped, because at that hospital, I was being pushed by the physios to do the hand bike and do my cardio and do whatever I could possibly do, getting on my feet as much as possible. And there's a photo of me that my mom took that there's this walker thing where I'm pretty much supporting all of my body weight with my upper body, but I'm walking down the hall at the Miz, just taking these terrible steps, but they're steps nonetheless. So I'd be a month in that hospital, and then I would be able to go home for Christmas, because when this all happened, it was the first week of the mountain being open. It was the beginning of November 9th. I'll remember that date forever. I was able to go to home for Christmas. So my parents bought this ramp that they would be able to wheel me in to my house with. And I would be able to go around my house in my wheelchair, and I would crawl up the stairs and go to my bed, because I hadn't seen my bed in a month and a half, and I just wanted the comfort. And the very first time I got back into my bed, I slept probably 16 hours or something, I don't know, without the distractions and the sounds of the hospital. And as a side note, hospitals, I don't know, they're supposed to be these places of healing, yet sleep is so important, but it's impossible to sleep in a hospital. If you've ever been to one, it just doesn't happen. There's sounds and alarms and everything going off, and I'm a shallow sleeper as it is, but come on. My friends were amazing. We went out to movies. We went out to restaurants while I was still in the wheelchair, and I had that support group around me, and that made a huge difference in my recovery. I wanted to prove my friends right, because they were the ones that were cheering me on. They were the ones that were saying, you can do this. And in my mind, I knew it. Fast forward a couple weeks, and at the rehabilitation hospital, they get you into a robot, actually. And they tie your legs to this thing that teaches you how to ambulate perfectly again. Well, I wouldn't say perfectly, but robotically, we'll put it that way. My friends would come and watch the progress, and a few of my friends have become physiotherapists themselves since the incident. I'm not going to take any credit for that, but you know who you are. The rehabilitation program, you're like a Navy SEAL. You are 4 hours a day working out, and then you get your break for lunch or whatever, and then there's another 4 hours, and then you go back to your room and you are able to be with family and stuff. But even while I was with my family, I was stretching and I was doing all of this other stuff. And I still remember the very first time I stood by myself with no assistance was in my my hospital room. And the nurse came in, and I was like, look at this. And I stood up from the wheelchair, and she was like, don't do that. And I was like, why? In 2 months, I had gone from absolutely no functionality below the waist to standing on my own. And I would end up walking out of the rehabilitation hospital, mind you, with an old man walker, looking like I was 90 years old myself, but walking nonetheless. There'd be various milestones from there. I would eventually start using a cane, and then a few months later, nothing at all. I was walking by myself again, and yeah, for probably about a year, it was my sole vocation. I missed a semester of school, so that gave me 4 months to work on me. I went back to school in the fall of next year, my third year of university, and even still, I was working out continuously, and even to this very day, I feel like I'm still in recovery mode. And I think I probably will be for the rest of my life, but that's okay by me. I can't run. I still get spasms in the legs. I wish I could squat like I used to. I wish I could pull deadlifts from the floor like I used to. But I'm still so thankful for the ability that I do have. To the doctor that said I would never pull 75 pounds from the ground again, I routinely pull 300. And every single time that I'm in the gym or doing something that I'm afraid to do, I just put that voice in my head that said, you can't do this. And then I say, yes, I can. And I just push through. The biggest thing is the mentality shift that came from this entire experience. If you knew me before this injury, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was listless. I didn't have a strong mentality. I didn't really have this understanding of who I was. And if nothing else, this whole thing gave me that understanding. And I know what I want to do with my life now. And that's to help people that have had similar experiences. And that's my story. It's still ongoing. And until the day I die, that hopefully will be. But what Invictus is meant to be is a way to have conversations with people, extraordinary people that have been through similar experiences and huge challenges in their lives. And the things that could have broken them only made them stronger people. The perspective you get from something like this is unfathomable. You realize that things can always be worse, and you need to be grateful for every single second that you have. You don't realize what you have when you're able to walk somewhere, or you're able to talk to people and you can hear, or you can see. There's people every single day that are losing these abilities, or are born without them, or never had them in the first place. And we always worry about all the little things, and why is the traffic so bad? Why is the weather so bad? And that stuff, it just doesn't matter anymore to me. And the people that I bring onto this show, I think that they're going to say very similar things, and that the big things are what matter. Your friends, your family, and the gratefulness that you have for every day that you're alive on this earth. I can go about wishing that things never happened like this, but it's all futile because it did happen. This is where I am today. And I have to be grateful for everything that I was able to get back after my injury. I'm in pain every single day of my life, and I couldn't be happier. And I realize that really nothing is that difficult anymore. If I'm faced with a challenge, I look back on what I've overcome, and I look to this new challenge, and it just doesn't feel like such a challenge anymore. If I can overcome that, I can overcome whatever life throws at me. And if you're listening to this, I hope that's the mentality shift that you can adopt in your own life and take for yourself. The mind and the body are two extraordinary things. And if you believe that you can do something, you can do it. Trust me. If you believe that you can do something physically, you can do it. It may take some training, it may take whatever, but you can do it. And if you believe mentally you can do something, you can do it. I hope that you've enjoyed the very first episode of Invictus. And I really hope that the people that we bring on to this show you all the beauty in life and what you can accomplish and overcome, even though things may seem tremendously bleak you can overcome it. Whatever it is. If you did like this podcast, please hit that subscribe button, and you can follow us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, and also Apple Podcasts. Pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can listen to the Invictus Podcast. And I'll leave you with this thought. How we survive is what makes us who we are. Until next time.